Today's webinar focuses on aging well, caregiving and caregiver support with a diverse set of specialists ready to actively engage you for the next 60 minutes and beyond. I'm Mohana, leading CWC's outreach and operations, and along with me, I have CWC Senior Track Leader Ritu Garg, as well as Sachin Deshmukh, our Senior Track Coordinator. We have a great line of speakers today, led by Dr. Mukundacharya, President and co-founder of Sukham, with Dr. Neelu Mehra, Department Chief of Palliative Care and Hospice and Medical Director at Kaiser Permanente, Ranak Trivedi, Assistant Professor of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at Stanford University, Smita Patel, Director Communications and Partnerships at EdSource, Neeru Verma, Founder and CEO of Peninsula Elderly Care Homes, and Alka Jaikar, who volunteers at Stanford Hospital, where she's a member of the Emergency Department Patient Family Advisory Council. As you can see, we are going to cover a lot of topics today, so please put in your comments in the chat box and questions in the Q&A box, and we'll make sure that we address them all. Before we begin this session, let me take a few minutes to talk about our organization, Crack the Wellness Code, or CWC, a nonprofit 5013C community-owned and community-driven movement with a dynamic and innovative wellness ecosystem platform offering resources, content, and services to personalize your own well-being. Our 5-year-old journey, we have had countless events, workshops, webinars, meditation, and yoga camps for our senior community, who, by the way, we call our happy seniors. As you can see on the screen, these are just a few of the events which we have conducted to help support and empower our community of seniors. Dr. Sachin Deshmukh, Dr. Brian Rees, and Esther Gokhale are just some of the amazing speakers who have joined us in the past. And for some of you who are new to CWC, you can access our past event videos and podcasts on our Khushi app. Ritu, our track leader, will be putting up these links in the chat box very soon. So please do download and sign up on our Khushi app and join our wellness community. Being a platform of wellness, CWC has always welcomed and partnered with different organizations like Sukham, whose services resonate with our intent and objective to serve the community. Needless to say, we are excited with this new joint venture, and today's event is the first of many. One of our objectives with this event is to create a WhatsApp support group for our seniors. This group is an empathetic, safe space of shared information, best practices, tools, and takeaways on different topics that specifically concern you. Please share your name and/or email address in the chat box with Ritu Garg to give your consent to be added to the support group. Alternatively, you can simply download and sign up on our CWC Khushi app, click on WSG, which by the way stands for Wellness Support Group, at the bottom of the screen and select Senior WSG. Once you sign up on our app, you have access to our huge content library of videos, podcasts, and events. And of course, if there are any issues, me and my team are always there to help you. And this is our latest offering to the community by way of an online wellness mart. Launching soon this year, if you have signed up on our app, we will keep you posted on the launch date. This platform will have vetted vendors providing products and services in lifestyle, diet, diagnostics, preventives, healing, and more. Please do reach out to us if you're interested in becoming a wellness vendor, and the links are going to be in the chat box. A quick note before I end, CWC is a platform for educational purposes led by a dedicated team of wellness champions, health heroes, and social workers. We do not directly provide any healthcare or health solutions and use the content of our events solely for educational and promotional purposes. And now I would like to introduce and welcome our Senior Track Leader, Ritu Garg. Welcome, Ritu, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Mohana. Hello, everyone. I am Ritu, based in Bay Area, and I welcome you all for today's session. I'm a homemaker, having completed my undergrad in biology and master's in chemistry. I always wanted to do something related to medical and healthcare field. So after coming to USA, I've been mainly focusing on my family and taking care of them. Soon my kids, they will be heading to the college. So I decided to step out and give something back to the community. Last year, I learned about CWC and attended its annual event. It was not only informative, but was fun also. I immediately decided to get associated with CWC. It is a wonderful team doing exceptional work by conducting webinars, workshops, in-person events to provide meaningful information and create awareness. This is my very first event on the senior track, and I am very excited and really looking forward. Thank you. And now it's my pleasure to invite Dr. Mukunda Acharya from Sukham. Over to you, Mukund.
I would like to add my warm welcome to all of you who joined our session today. As Mohana and Ritu mentioned, I'm the president of Sukham, and we are delighted to be partnering with Crack the Wellness Code to bring you today's panel discussion on caregiving and support for caregivers. So let me just share my screen here. I will be leading today's session on this topic together with my fellow panelists. We hope to provide you with some useful and actionable information, as well as access to resources that will be useful for caregivers. Each of us on the panel have experience and touch points with different aspects of caregiving, and each of us have stories to tell. I myself have firsthand experience as a caregiver for my late wife for several years when she was seriously ill. Also, in my younger days, I had the immense privilege of supporting and helping my mother while she was taking care of my father, who had Parkinson's and dementia. I will tell you more about the other panelists when I introduce them in a few minutes. But first, I want to begin by telling you just a little bit about our organization, Sukham. We are a nonprofit organization, and our mission is embodied in the 3 E's. We educate, empower, and enable all the members in our community to practice living and aging well, including care for the body, mind, soul, and spirit, to be prepared for life's transitions, those unexpected events that get thrown at us, and to support in the best way possible loved ones and friends who are dealing with chronic or serious illness. Sukham's goal is to help you navigate and overcome cultural and information barriers that you may face and access resources that lead to a dignified, healthy, and happy life, no matter what your circumstances are. We do this in different ways. Like today, we do run Zoom sessions. We also organize and present workshops in person. We guide people one-on-one to find answers and locate organizations and or solutions for their specific problems. And we have a lot of useful information and resources for all readers on our website, which you should go visit sometime when you get a chance. It's www.sukham.org, and we'll be putting that in the chat box for you as well. So one of the things, as I said, Sukham does is providing information on a variety of different topics. So what sort of actionable information do we have for you on various topics of aging and ill health, such as what is healthy aging, understanding and dealing with Alzheimer's and dementia, overview of elder care and geriatrics, how to avoid or deal with chronic illness and disability, understanding palliative care and hospice, talking about what advanced care planning is and how to fill out advanced directive forms. These are just some of the kind of topics that we can talk about, including what we're discussing today. If you're interested in these sort of topics, to arrange a session, you can either contact me via the Sukham website or our partner CWC, and we can together bring you more information on these topics. So with that background, let's dive into the topic for today's session. Jimmy Carter, the former president of the United States, has been in the news of late. As some of you know, he recently decided to enter hospice. He's a 98-year-old person with a very, very distinguished history. His wife, Rosalind Carter, who was First Lady, of course, when he was president, started what's the Rosalind Carter Institute of Caregiving. And this quote of hers is very central to what we're talking about today. She says there are only four kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. This quote that Mrs. Carter says is very true. This quote of Mrs. Carter's is quite relevant to what we're talking about. There are a lot of people in the US who deal with chronic diseases. 200 million Americans today live with at least one chronic illness, like a heart disease and stroke, or cancer, or diabetes. About half of these people, more than 100 million, have multiple conditions. I have a relative in my family, for instance, who's dealing with cancer and diabetes and has severe issues with arthritis. It's not just older people who have 20% of kids today under the age of 17 are limited by at least one chronic illness, disease, or disability, right? 80% of those of us who are over 65 as of 2014 had at least one chronic illness. And many of them have more, as I just told you. So these diseases are the leading causes of death and disability in the US. And they're also a leading driver of healthcare costs. In fact, the healthcare run to something like 18.3% of the GDP today. So chronic disease has its huge impact on both society and people. And when you look at another condition that we're all familiar with, Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia are on the rise. Currently, there are about 6 million people living in the US with Alzheimer's. That number is expected to increase to about 14 million by 2050. It's currently the sixth leading cause of death in the United States, according to the CDC. And 15% of the population in the senior group, 15% of the people who are over 70 have dementia or some other form of Alzheimer's. So when you look at these kind of conditions, you ask yourself, who looks after these people, right? And they're individuals like you and me, and that's who we call caregivers. So let's look very briefly a little more about what caregivers do and who the caregivers are, right? There are an estimated 53 million adults who are family caregivers as of 2020, and that had gone up over 22% compared to 2015, and we expect that number to keep rising steadily as we move forward in the years to come. About a quarter of these caregivers look after more than one person. That's an increase of 33% over the past 5 years. It's no surprise to people on this call that 61% of these caregivers are women. The average caregiver's age of the caregiver is around 50 years, although there's a sizable percentage of people who are seniors who are looking after other seniors, a spouse looking after, a husband looking after a wife, or a wife looking after a husband, for example. 1 in 10 of caregivers is actually a college student. So it's not just older people who are caregivers, right? So we talk about caregivers. It's useful to ask what it is that caregivers do. Almost all of them help with what are called instrumental activities of daily living. By this we mean driving a car, going shopping for groceries, answering a call, making appointments. doing all the things that we need to do to live life on a day-to-day basis. 60% of caregivers help a person with their own daily personal care, getting dressed, getting out of bed, taking a shower, eating, those kinds of things, right? 8% perform actual tasks of that a nurse would perform, giving injections, administering different kinds of special medications. 80% manage medications on a daily basis for the patients. Half of them serve as care coordinators across various providers, right? So you have multiple illnesses, you have to coordinate the care that the patient receives, which is a critical part of the care for the patients. And in fact, other members of family or community, such as children in the home, are often called to help out and help out with these care tasks. So it becomes a family affair when we care for people at home, right? So caring for someone is not just about performing these tasks. Care is more than that. It's about supporting the person itself. And we have to do our best to respect their dignity, respect their wishes, and treat them with compassion and empathy. So caring for someone is not an easy task. If you ask me, what 3 words would I use to describe it, I would say caregiving can be challenging, caregiving can be exhausting, but caregiving can also be rewarding. And you'll hear about some of these factors as we go forward with the rest of the panel, right? And so it's not just a societal and family burden that we have to be concerned with. The impact of caregiving is enormous on families. It disrupts people's life and relationships. They have to make fundamental changes in how they live. Sometimes they have to leave work, get up and move somewhere else in order to take care of family members. They have to deal with stress induced by not understanding what's going on, by lack of awareness of the system, and so on. So there's a lot of things that caregivers are faced with. And as Rosalind Carter said, chances are you will need to be cared for or become a caregiver. So what we are one of the main reasons we're doing this presentation for you today is we want to stress the importance of planning ahead and being prepared for caregiving, right? And with that, I want to just briefly introduce you the rest of the panel. Mohana already told you that who the panel members are: Alka Jayakar, Smita Patel, Dr. Neelu Mehra, Dr. Ranak Trivedi, and Neeru Verma. And what I'm going to be doing is I will work with this panel to hopefully help make all of you better, more conscious caregivers, or help others become better, conscious caregivers. With that, I'd like to now introduce Alka Jayakar. Alka has a background in mass communication. She worked as a TV and film producer in Mumbai and was Southeast area manager for Air India. She's a community volunteer and as an avid advocate for women's issues. As Mohana mentioned, she volunteers at Stanford. And over the past years, Alka has been a caregiver for her mother, who is now 97 years old and who is an artist in her own right. So Alka is going to be talking to you about being a caregiver for her mother, some of the challenges that she's faced, some of the rewards she's seen, and what it means to have that relationship with her mother as a caregiver and as a daughter. And while Alka is going to be talking, she's asked me to share some images of some pictures of her mother, and also some paintings that her mother has painted over the years. And I'll be doing that in the background as Alka talks. So Alka, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mukund, and hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I'm happy to get this opportunity to share my experiences. Caregiving for me actually was something I had never imagined I would be doing with such intensity, depth, and interest. It was definitely not one of the career choices I had made in my days as a television producer or, in my days with Air India, where aviation and filmmaking and scripting and direction were actually everyday things to do. I landed up with caregiving when my father first had a stroke on a plane and then was bedbound in the Bay Area. I spent a few months with him taking leave of work, and it was my first exposure one-on-one of the American medical system and how good and efficient it could be, how compassionate it could be. It, of course, meant that I had to take a break from work because the other family members had other very intense things going on. My mother was by herself. And it gave me an insight as to what families really go through, but not to forget that that was way back in the 90s when one was much younger. Little after that, I had the experience of looking after my widowed grandmother in Mumbai because I still lived and worked in Mumbai. She was 93, lost her only son to cancer, and had no real immediate relative to look after her in Mumbai. So I ended up looking after her. That was also a very different kind of experience because medical systems in the US and India are totally, totally different, as we all know. Of course, the help factor in India was much more predominant and helpful on a day-to-day basis, whereas here, it was by remote. My father was bedbound and far, far away in a subacute care place. Subsequently, about 20 odd years later, I again found myself being called upon to caregive for my mother, who by that time was widowed, required cardiac care, required severe diabetic care, and things like that. And about 8 years ago, I actually relocated to the Bay Area to spend time with my mom. And that's when I really got a first-hand impression of what caring for the aged single-handed can be. So what happens is that when people are busy with things in their young age, they do not anticipate how their later years are going to be. My mother had turned to painting as a refuge from the stress of dealing with the sickness of my dad. She had been an artist in her young days. She also somehow had this impression that she had not been able to use her talent to full fruition. And she often said that in the course of our conversations that, all you people, you'll have had careers and you'll have done such exciting things. And although she's very well traveled and well educated and all that, she hadn't really had a career in the real sense. She'd been a great homemaker, a great artist and all that, but she hadn't ever exhibited. So one of the things in the context of caregiving is, I would suggest, based on my experience, watch out for what the interests are of the person you're caring for. Either try and give them an exposure to those situations where they can hone their skills, exhibit their talents, and do whatever it is that they can do, so that gives them a tremendous sense of direction. My mother was practically like a new person when all her exhibitions were on. She had 3 solo shows in the Bay Area. She had painted approximately 100 paintings of small and large sizes over the years. And it was just kept, in boxes and cartons. And to me, it seemed like a colossal waste of talent not to share it. It was totally for non-commercial reasons. We did not sell a single painting because that was not the motive. What I plan to do with her work is have a moving exhibition. And my mother has requested me to ensure that some of her paintings are donated to various important hospitals who do not charge patients any money for their care. So that was a very, very, important thing for my mom, and it was very important for me too. Secondly, when I had to deal with my father, who was in a comatose condition, it was a huge shock to find this 6'1" person who has been such a towering hero in your life and done so much in his own life to be suddenly bedbound, unable to move, unable to communicate, unable to express with a trach. But this is what life teaches you. I remember the words of William Wordsworth, who, apart from writing beautifully on daffodils, also said things like, "Child is father of man." And when I first heard that sentence in my school days, I don't really think I understood the full impact of what it meant. But as the years wore on and little expecting to be put into this kind of a situation, I did tend to agree with Wordsworth that child is indeed, if not the parents, if not the father, only a parent of man and or woman or human or whatever we wish to call it. But it has been a very, very emotive experience. There are highs and there are lows. All caregivers have to, of course, look after themselves, but you do tend to get worn out at times. But the end result is extremely satisfying. And I would say that more and more young people should be exposed to people of different generations so that they do not have a generational bias. It's not just about gender bias. In today's context, we have to think of impact of young people and how they behave towards the aged, towards aging. Aging has to be deemed a very acceptable situation where people are interacting with different generations so that everybody is comfortable and happy. So that's all I have to say. And thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Alka. Next, I would like to introduce Smita. Smita Patel is Director of Communications and Partnerships at EdSource, a nonprofit newsroom devoted to covering equity in education. She's also a community activist and is involved with several nonprofit organizations. She's a caregiver for her elderly parents, and looks after the interests of an elderly neighbor with age-related issues and some cognitive decline. And Smita will talk to us about lessons that she has learned while looking after her parents and this neighbor, and about the need to plan ahead. So Smita, please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. And thank you, Mukund. Thank you, CWC, for the invitation and to Sukham. Not quite sure where to start, but I would say I live with my parents. My dad's 89, mom is 85, and I'm coming to appreciate, and I really love what Alka talked about, but I'm appreciating what a privilege that is, and I'm learning a lot. My parents were recently on a trip to India. My mother's starting to get a little forgetful, which has sent us into quite a panic in many ways, because as Mukund mentioned, we've also been helping a friend who has dementia. So we sort of are seeing down the road what happens. And it's very hard. There's a lot of emotional and psychological stuff to deal with. Just the concept of one's mother not being able to do all the things she used to do. So I'm learning to process that. But they were in India for 4 months. And while they were there, I got a stark epiphany of how isolated our lives here can be, especially for older people. In India, they were with family and everyone would get up together and have tea together and then have breakfast together, and then friend would go for baths and then have lunch together and go visiting or have visitors. And there are just constantly people around. There was a lot of coming and going. There was interaction. Life was very full. And here I'm working during the day. And so my parents are often left to their own devices. So when they came back, having realized that, I've been trying a lot more to be more present, not to be just tied up in my busyness of life and the stress of my next deadline, but actually to focus on them and their needs and just be more present. And I've noticed that it's actually made a huge difference in how my mom is doing in terms of how much she's remembering and how much she's processing. So I realized that it's important for her well-being for me to do that, but it's also really helped me manage my stress better because I've had to stop just running around like the headless chicken and be mindful of what I'm doing and when. Our friend who has dementia, she was a neighbor who lived down the street from us and got stuck in India during the COVID time and came back still during COVID, but a year and a half later. And another friend and I went to collect her from the airport and settle her in. And we quickly realized that she was not able to stay alone. I mean, she had become so forgetful. She didn't know how to operate the phone. We got quite nervous. And over the next months, weeks and months, we found we had to take her food, make sure she ate because she wasn't eating, staying by herself. So that to me is a reminder of how important it is to plan. In our friend's case, she had to, she doesn't have family close by. She lived alone, no children. And so we brought in some of her extended family when we realized that she was really struggling alone. And eventually they were able to find a senior assisted living memory care place for her to stay and transferred her there. But unfortunately, that was very much, even though she agreed to it, she was persuaded along each step, but she's not happy there. She hadn't bought into that when she had the ability to actually process and understand and remember her decisions. And now she will, from 1 minute to the next, not remember. So, but she still recognizes people and she still knows who she is and she still remembers her house. And so it's heartbreaking to see her struggle. And I just wish that if we had known to support her in this way, if she had been able to be more proactive and move to a assisted living earlier in the process, so that would have been like home with her, or to make some other arrangement, have people living with her, something, because she's actually in pretty good shape still. She's aware. She's not, someone who's wandering around without knowing who they are or who anyone is. But she just cannot live alone. And I think if one thinks about these things sooner and plans sooner, you can get a better outcome for yourself than if you sort of go with the flow until it's too late and then the control gets taken away from you. And now others are making decisions for her. And so that's been really heartbreaking, really difficult. She's very fortunate, though, to have a huge, loving, wonderful community who supports her. So, we have friends who go check in on her weekly. I take care of all her medicines and doctor's visits, and we're all in constant touch about how she's doing and what she needs. But again, better to start planning ahead. So that's my 2 cents. And I will hand it back to you, Mukund. Thank you.
So thank you, Smita. And if you could enable my video while I'm moderating, that would be useful. So Smita, gave you one point of view on the importance of planning. And that's critical as we will continue to discuss as we go through this panel session. But we also, as caregivers, need to learn how to deal with the unexpected, the unplanned, and that keeps happening all the time. And that's part of the experience of caregiving too. And I just want to point out in that context that Alka had to deal with this unexpected, unplanned event just to get to today's panel session. In fact, Alka, if you don't mind, I'll share with you everyone on the call the fact that Alka is actually attending this panel session from the hospital room where she had to take her mom into hospital all of a sudden yesterday on an emergency basis. Mom is in stable condition. She's doing well, but nevertheless, Alka had to respond, turn on a dime and respond and be able to support her mom and also be here for us today. And for that, Alka, special thanks to you. So we've heard from some excellent perspectives from two caregivers. Now we want to sort of change a little bit and get the viewpoint of a couple of professionals. First, we'll start with Dr. Neelu Mehra. As Mohana mentioned, Neelu is Department Chief of Palliative Care and Hospice and Medical Director at Kaiser Permanente. She's also trained in energy medicine, an active community service volunteer. In fact, she's a good buddy and a friend of mine, and helps with run Sukham currently. She will describe her experience dealing with caregivers on a daily basis, provide both a personal and a physician's perspective on the challenges of caregiving, and highlight also the importance of planning ahead as well as dealing with things as they come up unexpectedly. So Neelu, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mukund, and thank you to CWC for inviting us and giving us the opportunity as Sukham to present today. So being a physician and being in this line of work, I see that caregiving can be a really, really challenging task. And you don't sign up for it. You don't anticipate it. Sometimes it just sweeps on you and takes over your life. And I see that people struggle. Sometimes they don't even understand what is it that they're required to do. Are we going to take over the emotional well-being of our loved one, or are we going to take care of the physical well-being of our loved one? So, and age is no bar, age is no criteria that it would not happen to a younger person, or it'll only happen to the older folks. So I had a 42-year-old friend who got diagnosed with a brain cancer. And from one day to the other, it took just one pivotal day and their whole life was different. So her husband not only had to be the caregiver for his wife, had to be the sole breadwinner, had to take care of their two young kids. And on top of that, they did not have time to think, what would she want if she did not have the quality of life that she anticipated? And who talks about this when you're in your 40s? Well, 40s is still, you could say that you are a little bit in the advanced track, but I had a 23-year-old who had this cancer, which was not curable. And her parents were immigrants and did not know how to navigate the healthcare system. They did not know what to expect. What medications is she going to get? How are they going to afford it? What insurance? Because she was a 23-year-old. She was going to graduate from college and she had plans and dreams to be a psychologist. And here she was struggling with life and death. So seeing this so often in my career, and one thing that comes out to me is that planning is extremely important. You have to know how to navigate the healthcare system. You have to know what disease are we dealing with. And am I going to be able to afford? Or am I going to be able to afford physically? I am not even talking financially here, because financially, caregiving can be a huge burden. And knowing how to navigate the healthcare system, even as a medical professional, can be a little hard. So not knowing the system and not knowing where to look and how to begin and where to go can be a huge barrier. So patients, when they come in with dementia, when they start to have memory issues, the first thought that comes to our mind is, oh, they're getting older. It's normal. It's common to see these things. And then slowly, when things start to build up, it is a little too late to get that paper signed where you may be able to access their finances, or you may be able to watch over these people. And these people were highly functional people. And if they're very functional, they can hide their deficiencies pretty well. So it's very important to make sure that you are really focusing on how they're managing their life, what is normal for them, and what's a shift in the normal, so that you're aware and you're keenly looking for the signs that you should not be ignoring. And then proactively planning and making sure that they have the paperwork. And paperwork, when I say that, who would make decisions for them? Where are they going to be? What is their financial situation? Do we have access to their finances? I had a patient today in my clinic who is financially, we don't know, we're guessing that he probably has the money. He's staying with a friend. He has no family members. And this friend is so kind that he's not able to say no to him. And he keeps asking him, are you going to take care of me or not? I'm going to stay with you. I'm going to stay with your family. I want you to make decisions for me. And I can see the moral distress in the friend's face, because he's making life and death decisions for him when he's so overwhelmed and does not know what the next step is going to look like. So when I brought up, does somebody has access to your finances? He said, no. And why do I even need that? And then he says, I'm very overwhelmed. I can't talk about this. Now, if you read back, and this person has been sick for a couple of years, and now things have advanced to the point that he needs help. He was living independently up until 2 weeks ago. So things, when they change, there's a lot of overwhelm that comes, not only for the caregivers, but also for the people who are going through this illness. So how do you support them? And how do you support the caregivers is extremely important. I have a patient whose daughter is willing to leave her job. And I know Alka did that too, to take care of her mom. But sometimes financially you can afford it, sometimes you can't. Life does go on, even if it's on the side. And while you are focused on taking care of your loved ones, it does encroach into your relationship. It does cause tension. It causes a lot of stress for the caregivers, because not only they have to figure out how to finance their own household, but also to take care of the ailing daughter or son or mom or dad, no matter who it would be. It causes a tremendous amount of stress on people. I have a patient who is in his 40s, and he was mentally disabled from the beginning, but pretty functional. He used to enjoy his outings. He was still working. And there are two parents who are sick themselves, have their own illnesses, and are doing their 100% to take care of their son, not knowing how to navigate the healthcare system. So looking for, what are the finances? How are they able to afford it or not? If they're not able to afford, ask for a social worker. So there are state resources. There are resources out there that can be navigated for you, but you have to know who to ask and how to make that happen, and making sure that you're understanding what life trajectory are they on? What is the disease that they're dealing with? How can we help support the disease? What other healthcare teams can actually help them live well and support their quality of life while preparing for them, and asking the patients, what would they like? What's the line in the sand for them? And having these conversations ahead of time makes things a lot easier, so that you don't live with that guilt of, how can I support this person? Or am I making the decision on this person's behalf? What would this person have wanted? And what would have been okay for them? And, there's an, I don't know if you guys ever read this book called by Atul Gawande, Being Mortal. He actually highlights being a physician. When his own father was sick, he did not know how to make those decisions. He said when he sat down with the oncologist, his head was spinning. He did not know what therapy would be better than the other, or should he even be going through the medications? Should he be even taking the chemotherapy? This, we're talking about a physician and a professional whose brain just freezes when it's your own loved one. Now you translate that into somebody who doesn't even know the healthcare system, that how overwhelming it could be. And when patients have dementia, the caregivers, there's a huge incidence of depression. 80% of the caregivers, they get depressed because it's a very, very hard disease to manage. So knowing what the patients would want, what are their financial structure looks like, what to anticipate, what to expect, and the planning has to be for the worst case scenario. You may be walking and talking today, like Smitha mentioned, her aunt is actually walking and doing everything right now. But we know as the disease progresses, they will have limitations. They will need full care. They may not be able to change their own clothes. They may be incontinent. So that level of caregiving has to be understood. And if it can be outsourced, if the resources can be tapped into, there's something to be said about being just a daughter or a son and being there holding your mom's or dad's hand versus navigating the healthcare, navigating the caregiving, and having the burden of two lives, one your own and one of your loved one. So it is a very, very challenging paradigm. And I could not urge enough to have advanced planning, to think through, have all the paperwork in order, and make sure that you're enjoying your loved ones every day and honoring their journey, like Alka said. I mean, what a brilliant idea to have an exhibition for her mom's paintings, and they look beautiful. They looked amazing. So I think knowing the person is the key in maintaining their dignity and actually taking them on or leading them on this path. So with that, I think I cannot urge enough to be prepared, do some legacy work with your loved ones, and make sure that everything is in order. So thank you again for giving me the chance to talk to you all.
So thank you, Neelu. If I can summarize a couple of things you said, and which echoes some of the things we heard before from Alka and from Smita, we have to be able to put ourselves in the other person's shoes. We have to be able to walk their steps and figure out what it is that person wants, what's important to them, and then utilize that information, right, Neelu, in order to help them the best way they can. It's also a complex situation. You don't want to, you hope for the best, but you want to be prepared for dealing with the worst when it comes along. So planning is important. There's constant stress of understanding rapidly changing situations sometimes, understanding what questions to ask, getting new learnings, and utilizing those to make decisions, right? And so together with all of this comes the need for caring for yourself at the same time as you're caring for the others. So there's it's a lot of moving parts, a lot of complexity, and the ability to know when to seek help and know where to go to seek help is also critical. If I paraphrase some of the things that you said there. So we can come back.
Exactly right. You know, if and nothing else, having a decision maker who's going to make decisions for this person, that itself is critical to navigate any healthcare system. You need to have a legal power of attorney for your healthcare decisions that nobody will even talk to you. We would not even call you to give you updates unless we had that paperwork in place. And so that is one critical thing. If anything that we were to leave from this is to make sure that you have the advanced directives and you're naming a person who would be able to make decision. And that is being created for 18 and above. There's no age bar for that.
We can come back and discuss some of these things more during our question, answer, and panel discussion session. Thank you for that, Neelu. With that, I'd like to bring in our next panelists and introduce Ranak Trivedi to you. Ranak is a professor of psychiatry and behavioral sciences at Stanford University. And she also serves as the director of what's called CARE, the South Stanford Center for Asian Health Research and Education. She directs the caregiving and family systems at that center. And as Ranak mentioned initially when she was talking, she also leads a program called the South Asian Family Approach to Disease, or SAFAD. Ranak's going to talk to us, in addition to what we've heard so far, to layer on that what I would describe as the cultural and family context that is, I guess, unique to our community, and also to describe both the joy and the stress of caring for someone, and some of the strategies, Ranak, of how you could reduce your stress while doing your best for the person that you love. Thanks, Ranak.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me and for the introduction. And it's been wonderful to hear people's stories. And Alka, I'm sending you and your mom and your rest of your family healing thoughts as you navigate the hospital system with her health. It's great to be here, and thank you so much, everybody, for joining at this late hour. I wanted to start with a story that I think is really relevant for this particular topic. There was an anthropologist. Her name was Margaret Mead, and she was very famous. And she'd done a lot of work in the 50s and 60s to understand the origins of human civilization and observing human social behavior. And she was asked one time what she considered to be the first sign of civilization in a culture. And people thought she would answer by saying something like, when we learn to use tools, or to make fire, or when we discovered the wheel. Instead, as the story goes, she said that the first evidence of civilization was a femur, which is the longest bone in your body, the one on your under your thigh. She found evidence that there's a femur that had been fractured and showed evidence of healing. So this would take about 6 weeks of rest and care. And back when this was discovered, this was about 15,000 years old. And humans at the time were really nomadic. They would go from place to place in search of shelter, to stay safe, to look for food. And usually if your biggest bone was broken, you'd just be left behind because it would slow down the whole tribe. But this showed evidence that somebody, at least one person, had helped this person when they couldn't move by bringing them food and whatever else they needed, so this leg could heal. So to her, this indicated someone had cared for another fellow human rather than abandoning them. And I think whether the story is true or not is probably not the point. It most likely isn't. It just sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? But I think it's important to think about caregiving in this way, that caregiving is so fundamental to our human experience. And as so many people have already talked about, all of us are probably caregivers, or are being or receiving care, or both. And just think about who's on this call. How many of you would think you are caregivers? And think of the people in your life who are providing care. Are they men? Are they women? Who is receiving the care? What kind of care is being provided? And as Mukund has mentioned, 53 million, actually that number has even gone up, identify as a caregiver in the US. So in the US, 1 in 5 adults are actually caregivers. And 2/3 of these are women and 1/3 are men. And there are key differences on how women and men approach caregiving that I think is important to recognize. Women are more likely to provide direct care, while men are more likely to purchase care. More women than men provide emotional support, taking care of somebody's feelings, sitting with them when they're feeling down, and things like that. And compared to men, women are more likely to either cut back on their work or leave the workforce entirely to become a caregiver. So because of this, women are more likely to experience a loss of income, a loss of health insurance, and delayed retirement. And we know that these disparities have only become more pronounced during the pandemic, as more women left their jobs to take care of people. And a lot of you are probably on this call because you are caregivers, or you want to help caregivers in your networks, in your families, or your friends. So when you think about what is it that caregivers do? Caregivers are sitting at the hospital bedside, as Alka mentioned. Caregivers are involved in advanced care planning and decision-making at various stages of treatment, including end of life. But there's a whole bunch of things that caregivers do. Caregivers help manage medicine. They encourage their loved one to exercise and maintain their health and lifestyle. They manage diet recommendations like preparing meals. And they often also monitor symptoms. If somebody has a condition that has, you have shortness of breathing, the caregiver may be the one who realizes that person either needs to take some medicine to help with that, or they need to go to the hospital. And then caregivers also help with preventive care. So getting flu shots, other vaccinations now, the COVID vaccinations. So it's not surprising that patients who have a caregiver actually have better health outcomes than those who don't. But ironically, caregivers put so much time and effort into managing their own health. They do this at the cost of ignoring their own health. They're managing their loved one's health is what I meant. They do this at the cost of ignoring their own health. So a lot of you who may be caregivers, you may delay your own clinical appointments. You may cancel your primary care appointment or your mammogram screening or your blood test, or just even getting your cold or cough taken care of because you're busy caring for somebody else. Now, there's a lot of emotions that go into caregiving. A lot of the speakers already have alluded to it. So I'll just give you some data around this. So 83% of caregivers say that they experience some positive aspect of caregiving. And we know that significant others, like partners, husbands, wives, girlfriends, boyfriends, they experience more caregiving joy than other relationships. And these positive effects come from because they feel rewarded because they're helping somebody in need. You feel good about yourself. People feel like they're growing their roles and responsibilities in a family when they start providing care. And people feel that they're getting more time with a loved one because of their caregiving responsibilities. They find meaning and purpose. And they feel like they're role modeling for the next generation. They're making sure that the kids see that caregiving is happening, and that's how we take care of it. But as you've already heard from other people, caregiving also brings high levels of stress and depression and caregiving burden. And the more intense the caregiving is, the more burden people experience. The more number of hours that people spend caregiving, they experience more stress. And then a lot of caregivers are juggling multiple other responsibilities like jobs or children or multiple caregiving responsibilities. Some people are taking care of more than one person. So a lot of this stuff that I've talked to you about already is conducted among non-Asian population, mainly in Western cultures. But a lot of this, as Mukund just mentioned, we are actually doing work that is focusing on how caregiving in the South Asian families takes place, especially around breast cancer right now. And I think this is really important because there's a clear cultural difference between the South Asian culture and the Western cultures. South Asian cultures are considered collectivist, meaning we are expected to prioritize the needs of the community over the self. The good thing about this is often there's more than one caregiver available, so you may notice that in your own network. You may have other siblings who can help out, or different friends who can help out, or neighbors who can help out. But we also know that caregiving is culturally embedded, what is expected. We often take care of aging parents in our own homes, and younger children in the South Asian culture are often involved in the caregiving responsibility at a younger age. In the South Asian culture, women are expected to be the caregivers of children, of older adults, and those who are sick. There's some data from India showing that 80% of caregivers are women compared to 2/3 in the United States. And in Indian culture, often the caregivers are most often the daughters-in-law. And it's important to recognize the sources of stress for our people in our culture. Asian caregivers in the US provide more than 24 hours of care each week, which if you think about it, that's more than a half-time job. And of course, nobody's getting paid to do it. And there's national data in the United States that Asians as a group, not just South Asians, report higher emotional stress compared to other race and ethnic groups. And the majority feel that they had no choice in taking care on their caregiving responsibility. So this is a big source of stress because people feel trapped in their caregiving relationship. And of course, in the South Asian culture, obtaining mental health care is also stigmatized. So people are getting a lot of stress, but not seeking professional help. And what we know is that this kind of statistics are so high level, but caregiving in our culture remains very understudied. And so we are conducting some groundbreaking work to shed light on this experience. And I can tell you a little bit what we're already hearing when we speak with South Asian women who are breast cancer survivors and their caregivers. And a lot of what we are hearing is that we are finding that caregivers feel underappreciated and unappreciated by both the healthcare teams and the family networks. Our caregivers are reporting that they receive some emotional support, but really are seeking practical help, such as help with meals or watching children. They want more recognition from the healthcare teams and more resources, especially in their native languages, to help them navigate breast cancer. And then they are telling us that they're in a strong need for connections with other caregivers so that they can learn from one another and provide support and then also get support. So we're working on projects that are building these type of interventions so that we can address the needs of South Asian families who are managing breast cancer. So I will talk a little bit about what are the things that you can do and can look, and then I'll hand it back to Mukund. The first thing is we have to take care of ourselves. There's a lot of cultural issues around this idea that if you focus on yourself, you're being selfish. And it's kind of also embedded in this concept of seva, because if you care for somebody else, it's like an act of religion as you're taking care of God. But in that, we also start feeling guilty if we focus on our needs. And it's important to not have that guilt and be compassionate towards yourself when you are providing care to somebody else. See if you can create a schedule that allows you to take some breaks from caregiving, especially if you're providing lots of hours of care or really intensive care. Seek help from other family members, friends, and nursing aides, and be specific in what they can do. So people who are close by might be able to help with meals or just spend time. If somebody requires a lot of supervision, they can come and sit with your care recipient while you take a break and do something else. People who are long distance caregivers can help in different ways. They can help by checking in with you and giving you support. They can send money. They can come once in a while to visit and really take over and give a full break so that you can go and take a break for yourself. And it's helpful to talk with other people who are caregivers, because then you might learn different ways they're navigating this. And then if you're feeling depressed, if you're stressed, burned out, talk to your primary care provider or a mental health professional and see if you can nip that in the bud, because caregiving burden can lead to depression, which can be really challenging to manage once you get there. So it's good to prevent it or detect it early and get help. I'm going to put a few links in the chat that also provides really great resources. National Alliance of Caregiving is one, and a few other ones. And then there's a group in India called Caregiver Sathi. It's led through Mumbai. And I'm going to put their link in the chat too, because they provide caregiving services in India that might be useful for that. And that's all I have, and I will hand it back to you, Mukund, and I'll put the links in the chat.
Thank you so much, Ranak. I would say, just to summarize what you said, caregiving can be isolating and stressful. So seek help, seek assistance, and it's not selfish to care for yourself while you're caring for others. So one of the things Ranak mentioned was that sometimes people look outside the family to get help with caregiving. And the next member of the panel is going to address one such service that's available in the Bay Area. So I want to introduce now Neeru Verma. Neeru is the founder and CEO of Peninsula Elderly Care Homes, which are essentially residential care facilities for for the elderly. And she will tell you more about the kind of assistance that they provide in the facilities that she runs. So, Neeru, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you, CWC and Sukham, for the opportunity here. Again, as Mukund mentioned, I am the managing director of Peninsula Elderly Care Homes. We are based in San Mateo County and Sunnyvale. We basically started just hearing from the stories, going through the personal life, caregiving part. I was a caregiver for my loving uncle recently, who passed away at the age of 53, very recent loss. Being the caregiver of grandparents, parents, going through, the life challenges, that's when I got into the elderly senior care about 7 years ago. I was basically, actually, I was in real estate in the beginning and went to see a house where I saw all the seniors sitting. It was a very small home environment, 6 beds facility in San Mateo, and got into and literally felt like this was us, and started asking, how does that work, and how do people come here? Why are they even here, leaving their family members and all? Slowly get to know that these 6 beds facilities are for seniors, just to make sure we basically provide a very homey environment for seniors. Not just seniors. I do have. I actually got the opportunity to serve quite young generations as well. One of the stories that I actually admitted one 59 years old female yesterday with cancer. And that was very, very heartbreaking just to hear the brother, what he was going through. She again, no planning. I seriously cannot emphasize enough on the planning side of it. Brother was literally in tears yesterday when I talked to him the very first time after knowing that she needs to be admitted in our facility. He said, I have no idea what to even do, what to say. I don't know how she's here and why she's here and what I need to do with her. Going from one point to another, was able to, help him out with attorneys and got all the planning done in a day. And she's with us today, but she's super duper young female going through cancer. So that's been pretty heartbreaking. And I have served residents who are 105 years old. I think that's the max age that I've done. It's been a pleasure, and it's been a very learning experience for me as a mom, as a daughter-in-law of a South Indian family, that how we, born and raised in India, coming over here, get to know the communities, get to see what family members go through and what we need to be prepared for. I always tell our family members too that please make sure to spend some time. Doesn't matter, as Dr. Mehra said, that it can happen at any age. There is no bar age. So planning wise, I can't emphasize enough. In terms of our facilities, I actually did have some slides that Mukund, if you can please share. In terms of the services that these small facilities we provide to our seniors and to our population, it's I don't know. So it's basically a 6 beds, very homey environment where we provide homemade food, do help out with all the ADLs, giving medications. We are licensed. We CDSS, Department of Social Services, we are licensed by them under Title 22. Basically, it's a 24/7 coverage where we have caregivers on staff. They manage everything and take the load of family members so that they can come and be with them and spend time with them and do, share their feelings, share activities with them that they love. And by the we get to see that with dementia patients and Alzheimer's, by the time they get to the sundowning part, how our caregivers are trained to handle their care. We do have hospice services as well, which means that once they move in to board and care facilities, they can stay there until end of life. Basically, again, taking the load from the family member to be taking them to doctor's appointment, managing that. We manage everything for the family members. And with hospice, I was able to start my own hospice about 3 years ago as well. Again, that was part of my goal as I started working in a senior community that wanted to keep the whole idea of having a family member, a parent, a grandparent, when they are with us, they should feel like home. I have a family member. I have a senior right now, elderly resident. She calls it. She actually has a pretty big board in her room. This is Nona's room now. This is Nona's home. So every time the grandparents come, they come and they walk around. They're at their grandma's house and they can have fun with anybody. They can go to other residents' room and play with them as well. So it's been a pleasure, like serving and getting to hear the stories for family members, getting to serve the community in a different way, where they feel that they have the support. They can come and talk to us, hand holding. With my hospice, I have had that best opportunity to walk patients to their exit doors. And that I feel like it's been a blessing for me, that I was able to be with families when they really need you. So with that, I will give it back to you, Mukund. And if anybody has any question, I would love to answer.
So thank you so much, Neeru. And with that, I'd like to invite all the panel members back on audio. And if there are one or two closing comments any of you on the panel want to make, we can do that. I think we still have about 10 or 15 minutes for question and answers that we can we'd be happy to try and get most of your questions answered to the best you can. But as you can see, we're dealing with something that's very complex. It's no one size fits all. Our goal here is to give you an idea of both the breadth and the depth of the different kinds of things we have to deal with as caregivers. We could, I think, go into a lot more detail or have a panel discussion, but at this point, perhaps it's more effective if we start to field some of the questions that people in the audience have. That we can then direct our responses to get some of those questions answered. I thought I saw a couple of questions earlier on advanced directives. Nina, I think you had some questions about that.
Yeah, can I ask? Basically, what I wanted is if you guys have any kind of a structure that says if I want to put everything in place that I require for my advanced planning, is it possible for me to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and put things in place so that, I'm 61 right now, but who knows about tomorrow? So taking your point seriously, do you have some kind of a structure or list of what I need to put in place? I have done my trust I have done my living trust and will. The medical directive, I think, is part of that. So that's in place. But my funny question, or maybe it's serious, I live on my own. I live by myself. So how would I, as a person who is not living with somebody else in the house, know that my regular forgetfulness is not just the normal forgetfulness, but it's also an onset of something?
Neelu, would you like to take
Yeah,
that?
I'll take that question. And Anina, it's a great question. And there's a huge spectrum from start to finish. But I think to sum it up, advanced directives is something that would be very, very important for you to work on. And when I say advanced directive, you already have a living will and you will already have your medical directives in there. But
Correct.
It's not just enough to say that I don't want to be resuscitated or I want to be resuscitated. There's a huge questions that you will find in advanced directive. What is a good day like for you? Because there's a lot of shades of gray.
Exactly.
Life and death. There is in between where if I'm not able to take care of myself, if I am cognitively not alert, what would I like my loved ones to do for me? And if I can physically not take care of myself, what would I like happening? And especially living alone, I think, and assigning a person who could speak on your behalf. Now, assigning a person without knowing that this person is going to speak on your behalf is going to be a good agent for you, or are they going to impose their belief system? And you may appoint me as your decision maker, and I say, well, I feel you should not be on machines at all. Whereas your feeling may be, I do want to try for some period of time. So it's not about me, it's about you and your belief
Following
system.
my wishes.
That's right. So these are your proxies who will follow exactly. But then when you don't lay out these line in the sand or what's my bottom line is, it is a very, very difficult task for anybody to make those decisions for you because it's a huge responsibility. I have to live with myself when I have made a decision for you. So that's why we always say it's a gift that you give to anybody who's going to be making decisions for you, to give and answer those questions. What is a good day like for me? What do I enjoy doing? What is most meaningful?
So in
Nina,
effect of that, the medical directive that you're asking to put in place has those kinds of questions that I can complete and put my personal needs and wants into place for whoever is then going to take charge of me when I go cuckoo.
That's right. An advanced directive will actually also name that person. And then that gives us authority as medical professionals to call that person, even if you were not able to speak for yourself. And let's say if you did not have that person in place and you were admitted to the hospital and you were confused, I would not have permission to talk to anybody. And this happens more often than not.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
That's why when you guys were talking, for me, it was more about getting a structure in place to figure out what do I need to put in place to make sure that, God forbid, if something does happen tomorrow, then the person that I've said can do XYZ for me based on what my wants and needs are.
And finances. You may have money sitting in a bank, but if nobody can access that money.
I've given power of attorney. I've done that.
Yeah.
I've given POA already.
And then medical alert is a good system to have, where you can push a button and 911 can respond when you're feeling a little funky or not funny. And being around your friends will point out that you're forgetting a lot. Are you really not take it personally, but take the next step and go to a geriatrician or go to your physician and say, seems like something is off for me. Can I have a neuropsych assessment where they can actually do a testing on you and can determine, are you really, because depression can also mask these symptoms as dementia.
Exactly.
So it has to be delineated, and there should not be any barriers in accessing even mental health, to be honest, because loneliness.
I agree.
Yeah, because it is for your own safety, it's for your own well-being, and it can completely mask as dementia. And a lot of patients we see are only depressed and they don't have memory issues, but it's very, very common again.
And I'll add one more thing to that, just to have one person checking on you every day. Just because recently what I have seen with my uncle was he actually went and sleep. We didn't check on him until like 10 o'clock in the morning when we were like, oh, he's not awake today. That's how we found out that he's not breathing anymore. So having that one person, someone that who can access your home and check on you every day.
That is a very, very important point. Actually, I had a patient just recently who was young and was living alone. And we had to send the police out because he was not showing up to his appointments. He had cancer. So he didn't show up 1 day, 2 day.
Wow.
We don't know how long he was dead in that apartment. And when the police went out there, he was no more. So that is a great point that Neeru brought up.
I agree, because my neighbor was gone for 6 days before we actually had the cops break down the door.
Yeah.
And no family here, no relatives here. Daughter lives out of state.
Yeah.
And then finally, the neighbor said, it's strange that she hasn't come out for a few days now. They knocked, they called the daughter called her, nobody picked up. We finally had to call the cops to open the door, and they found her in bed and had, as per the coroner, had been gone almost 6 days. So that was quite sad.
Thanks for that. There's another question on in the chat from Ram. He says, what do you think of caregiving service providers that do this as a business? How reliable are they? How do you evaluate them? So Neeru, I think you would agree that the reliability and quality in the caregiving business covers a huge spectrum.
Yes.
From one end, from very good to very bad. As an objective person in this business, what's the best advice you would give Ram?
I always tell my own family members, and again, on personal side and on professional side, please go meet the administrator first. Always meet them. You want to know what their mission is like. There are 80%, I feel like 80% providers out there, they're all about financials. Yes, we do need to run the business, but at the same time, I would look for emotions. I would look for what's your mission? Why are you here? You get to know their background. If you see anything that matches with your goal, with your life goal, your personal, your family member's goal, that's the point that's where you want to put your family member in.
And I think I would also add that have a list of things that your family members want. And what kind of social stimulation, what activities do they have? What kind of caregiver, what's the ratio of the caregivers that they offer? And what exactly are the needs of the person? If they don't even have somebody overnight watching over them, and this person is in diapers and needs to be changed, then that's not a fit for you. And so I think that ratio is very important to see. And then especially if you're enrolling somebody in hospice, making sure that they believe in hospice philosophy of care.
Exactly.
If they don't, then that's not a right fit. So I think having a set of questions is very helpful when you go looking for these
and especially like in our culture, like in Indian culture too. I've recently had a patient, Indian patient in our hospice. Again, getting to know their values too. What do you want? What are your last rites? What do you prefer to do? I had a sister, she flew in from Alaska like 2 days after, and she's like, before I come in, can you please make sure the Ganga Jal is there? I understand that part because, again, we are in the same culture. So when you sign up for any services, any provider that you go out with, get to know their mission, get to know them more. Ask as many questions as you can. It's your family member. So that's the key.
Yeah. Can I just add here, because I think Neeru said something earlier that's really important, is, our friend has ended up in a memory care unit, and all these rules about it having to be locked, and she's terribly lonely because she's much more together than most of the other people in that unit. And we didn't understand that because it also has just regular assisted living. So shop around, because Neeru says you don't have to be in a memory care locked unit. So because I think she would be much happier in a smaller place with more friendly care. Than in a
Where people
facility.
can visit you, you can have some commotion, some activities that you can do. It doesn't have. We are not locked facility. We are very homey, very. We do need to keep them safe. We do have cameras all around in the common areas. We do need to keep an eye on who's going in and out, who's coming to meet them. We do have sign-in, sign-out sheets, but not that we are locking the residents in. But yes, there are patients as they progress with their disease that they have to be in a locked memory care. But coming from Smita, there is an option.
So, Mohana, I just want to do a time check. We're a minute or two past the hour. I think the panelists would be happy to stay on for a few more minutes if there's other questions, but I just wanted to see how you want to go forward.
We can take one or two more questions. We are almost past the time, but we did start a minute or two later. So 1 or 2 questions more is fine.
Okay. So let me open this for any questions the audience has. One of the points I would make regarding what Neelu was talking about earlier is evaluate what your wishes are in terms of what you want to be, what quality of life you want. So for every medical procedure that you're faced with, should I take it or should I not? You need to ask the question, how will this impact the life that I want for myself? How will it impact my quality of life? And then when you talk to your healthcare agent or surrogate decision maker, let her or him know what those quality of life features are, so that they can make the decision in the context of what you would want for yourself. I see in the chat that people have asked about where you can get advanced care directives. If you go to the Sukham website, we can give information there. You can find the information there. Alternatively, if you put a question in the Sukham website, then we can answer any other further questions that you have. So please do contact us directly if you have more questions on that, on anything related to advanced directives or anything else that we talked about today.
I will add, though, that if you have advanced illness or anybody in the family have advanced illness, there is a pink form that is very important, especially if you're deciding to place them in a facility or they need to be in a skilled nursing for rehab. It is a pink form which kind of speaks about your preferences for resuscitation, that if something were to happen, if you were having a natural passing, would you like to be resuscitated or not? And that is mandated, because if you don't have that form, then the EMTs who would respond are committed to perform resuscitation if you did not want it. So I think that's also important, but that's also for people who are more sicker in an advanced disease trajectory, where it's important that you would anticipate that they will go in and out of the hospital or something might happen, like heart disease or lung disease, or they have very advanced Alzheimer's disease. It's very critical that you have that form. Otherwise, by law, they have to perform resuscitation, whether you want it or not.
I've put a note in the chat box. It's called a POLST form. It's called Physician Order for Life-Sustaining Treatment. And it's not a form that you fill out yourself. A physician has to fill it out after having to have a discussion with you.
Yeah, it's a physician's order, basically. So you sign and a physician sign, and you have to have a discussion around it because there's a lot of nuances around it. It's not as simple as that I want to be in machine or not. When you do get on the machines, the odds are very, very low that you will get off of it, and especially if you have advanced illness. So having a thoughtful discussion, no answer is right or wrong. And it's okay to have resuscitation if that's what your value system is, but do understand these choices, where are they going to lead you and what outcomes you might have. and which are either acceptable or not acceptable to you.
Once again, thank you to all the panelists for making the time to come talk to our group today. And with that, Mohana, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mukund. Really amazing session. Thank you to all the panelists. It was wonderful. I learned a lot as well, and I'm sure everybody did so as well. Just one little addition from CWC, because I was hearing all the questions, and it sounds like, you know, a community of people where they can come in together to share information and also to share stories, something like a support group. I know I mentioned it earlier. So if anybody would like to be a part of a group like that, please put in your emails in the chat box. And once we get your consent, then Mukund and I, you know, we can talk about how to actually go about giving you more information and resources for, you know, from CWC and from Sukham as well. So, but we will need your consent for that. So just if you are interested, please put it in the chat box. And of course, you can always reach out to Mukund and to me or my team. So that will be, we are always here to help. But thank you, Mukund, and thank you, Neelu. Thank you, Neeru. Thank you, Alka. Thank you, everybody, Smita. And thank you to all the audience for attending.
Thank you.
Thanks
for
to
having
everyone.
us.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.